welcome, welcome. On this call, we're going to help you create your ultimate home video setup for YouTube, for Zoom, and more. Because I really believe that if you're not on video right now and you've got an online business, you are basically invisible. Because people don't want to just hear your content. They don't want to just hear your words. They want to see your face and connect with you as you share your message. And there are over 4.5 billion people online today. And so many of them are searching via video. All right. And so if they're not finding you on YouTube, if they're not seeing you, if you don't have that opportunity for people to connect with you on Zoom, then you're really missing a massive opportunity. However, how you appear as you show up on Zoom can make or break that impression. Whether you appear like a pro, whether you've got the lighting and the camera and the audio right, or you look like, you haven't showered in a week and your camera's fuzzy and your audio is crackly and all of that. Like, you want to make that first impression really count. So getting your video set up right for all of the ways in which you use video, whether it's live video on Zoom, live streaming video on Facebook or Instagram, videos that you're recording and posting on YouTube that are going to be out there forever. You really want to get this set up right, because this is really your opportunity to reach the world with who you are and what it is that you do. So for those of you who don't know me, I'm Marisa Murgatroyd, and I've made over $20 million online with programs and courses. And I want to introduce you to my personal photographer, Richard Liu, who's such a camera geek that he actually photographs watches as his day job. And photographing watches is probably one of the most technical kinds of photography that you could do, because trying to photograph metal is extremely difficult. So when I wanted to get my camera set up at the beginning of, COVID-19, where I was starting to do way more Zooms than I've ever done in my life and probably ever want to do again, he was the guy that I turned to for support on that. And I've got this limited space here in my office, but I've really set up my home office so I could show up on informal Zoom calls and formal Zoom calls. And he's the one who made this happen. And it can be a little bit technical, but there are technical and non-technical solutions. And he's going to cover what the key components are for this. And I promise you, if you make a little bit of investment or a big investment, it's totally up to you how much of investment you want to make. But making this investment really matters. And I don't know about you, but I spend up to 5 hours a day, sometimes a lot more if I'm leading an event, sometimes 8 to 10 hours a day on Zoom. But on an average basis, I'd say I'm clocking 5 hours a day on Zoom using live video, and being able to just show up as my best self really makes a difference over time. So whether you're clocking an hour or two on Zoom a day or a lot more like I am, this matters. And especially as you start to go onto YouTube and post videos and all kinds of other places. So Richard, what are the key components for getting your video studio right? What are the key elements that we're going to be talking about over the next, bit?
Thank you, Marisa, for that intro, and I hope everyone's doing well. Again, my name is Richard. I've been a professional photographer for the last 5 or 6 years, and really the key components of creating your own setup is lighting, camera, and angles. And I'm sure you guys have heard the term lights, camera, action. It's said in that specific order for a very specific reason. So what I really want everyone to focus on is finding your light. So lighting is everything. Again, I go back to that saying lights, camera, action. That's because lighting is key. And typically when we think about lighting, typically what we'll find is in a house, you'll have plenty of situations where the living room has great light, the kitchen has great light. But what you really want to think about is, what is the best light for you? Usually for me, I direct people who, around the house, a large window usually works the best. A large window, some shears, and you want ambient lighting. So currently I'm in an ambient light situation where I have light coming from the outside of my window, which is right over here in front of me, just a little bit to my right. And the sun's not directly in my face. I have no screens or shades on, and it's just a really nice natural feel. Now, the area with the most light might not be the best light. So for example, when you're outside in the park or you're outside in the middle of the day, and it's typically not the best looking, not the best time for you to be just kind of out there in the middle of the sun. It's usually harsh lighting, creates harsh shadows. And why is that? It's because the sun is, even though it's a really large light source, it's really small in terms of the distance from the sun to the earth. So it's actually almost like a flashlight. And if you ever, use a flashlight on yourself, you look kind of creepy. So that's something you really want to avoid. You want to find an area with a large light source, typically a large window, maybe in your living room. And if you're getting direct sunlight, what really helps is if you have some shears. So think about where in your house has the most light. No, I mean, not the most light, the best light, not just the most light. So here's an example of an area that has lots of really, ambient light. But the problem is that you see these ceiling lights here, which are really great and they look awesome. Ceiling lights are actually designed for the house. They're actually not designed for people in terms of how they make you look and bringing out your best angles. So typically, even though this has lots of great light, it's actually not the optimal place to probably have a Zoom call. Instead, I would recommend something like this. Living room, large window, some white shears that really just kind of block out direct sunlight, and it gives a really nice natural feel. Now, something you want to be kind of aware about is mixed and harsh lighting. So again, harsh lighting, a good example would be the sun. It's a very small source of light in proportion to where we are in the solar system. And so it's a small light, almost like a flashlight, and it beams light at you. You create these harsh shadows. They just don't look good. Mixed lighting is another issue that you might want to think about. So typically we have phones, cameras, laptops, and they do a really good job of balancing light in terms of perhaps you have a lamp here, your window light here. But what happens is if you ever seen someone else, if you had a Zoom call, whether it was your friends or your family, and you see like there's some mixed colors going on, some blues and orange, that's because your laptop or your camera or your phone is having trouble processing the different types of lighting there in the room. So typically when we get into a situation where there's multiple lights, you want to focus on just one single point or one source of light. So typically, whether it's natural light, you want to keep all the lights in your room turned off so that you're not mixing yellow with typically that something's more in the midtones. And you want to make sure that if you have maybe not a lot of ambient light or not a lot of natural light, and mostly just artificial light, whether it's from a lamp or a large light source, that you keep it to just that. So this way you're not mixing light and you don't look like two different colors, because that just doesn't look good.
Absolutely. And as you can see right now, the only light that I have is natural light. And even though I've got an extra light in front of me that I can turn on, I almost always just use the natural light source most of the time.
Perfect. Yeah. So again, we really want to focus on natural light and a natural look. Okay. So angles. This is kind of a fun one, but it's really straight to the point. We want to find our optimal angle, and that's usually just at or above eye level. Typically, I mean, I'm going to make this example here. You can see here in this picture, the laptop, the phone, things that we usually have now with cameras built in. The cameras are built in for convenience. They're actually not there because it's a marketing, it's a selling point, it's a built-in webcam. They're there for convenience. They're not actually supposed to be, down in your lap and you're looking down. No one wants to see up your nose. It's not the best place to have. So typically what I recommend is bringing the laptop or your phone, using a device like something you can buy online, to bring the device or the camera up to your eye level or just above. So again, buy something or create something. You can use a shoebox, some books, adjust the height of the camera or the laptop or the device or whatever you're working with to just above or at your eye level. Now we can talk more about the technical things. So this is really, an example of how to pimp your Zoom. So again, when it comes to lights, camera, action, the first thing we want to focus on are lights. Typically, I recommend something like a large softbox if you don't have a large window. Audio, typically a shotgun mic works really well, and those are mics that are very directional. They're versus something that's more like this, which is more omnidirectional. Usually when it comes to audio, you want to keep things at half arm's length. If not, you start to run into sort of echo situations, and those usually just don't work really well. You want the mic to be really close and very directional. And then third is a camera. Again, I can use my laptop, or I can use my camera, or I can use my phone, but none of that really matters if the first two things aren't great. And the reason why I prioritize audio over camera is that you can have a great looking, everything's perfect, but if they can't hear you, it really doesn't matter. Lighting is everything. Audio I would focus on second, and then the camera. You can spend lots and lots of money. You don't need to, but if you do, the first two things are the most important. Here are some examples of things you can buy. So what I mean by a directional mic, you can see the Rode mic with that little bit of red right here. That's what we call a shotgun mic. That's very directional. It's focused on one person in the room, and it doesn't pick up as much ambient sound as something like a snowball, which is this mic here. It's one of the most popular mics you can buy. And that, great if you keep it in half an arm's length, but if you keep it anything further, you're going to run into echo situations. And that's not a great thing to have. Another thing you can buy to supplement your light is a softbox. Again, if you don't have large windows, I'm looking at this screen, but I should be looking here. If you don't have large windows, a softbox using 1 or 2 constant lights with typical light bulbs, you just plug it in, super easy. You place about 15 degrees or even maybe about arm's length to your left or to your right, and that works really well. I myself use a light panel like the bottom right on your screen. The reason why I use that is because I don't have a large office space. I need something very compact and easy to take with me if I need to go somewhere. So I love using something that's more of that size. Typically, I recommend something about 16 to 20 inches in length, just to, again, a large light source is really important. If it's too small, you're going to get harsh lighting, and that's just not good. Here's a shopping list I created, and I'm pretty sure I can post this into the chat box. These are some of the things that I recommend that you buy, or I would recommend to others to buy. These are things that I have used or I've tested, and I would highly recommend. Again, you don't need to buy these things, but these are things that you can buy to help supplement, for example, if you don't have a large window, or if maybe your webcam is not good, or if you just want to upgrade your webcam.
Let's talk a little bit more about background as well, in terms of, how to get a good background. And, just so you know, my laptop here, it's on a riser, just a laptop stand on top of a book. And then my camera is about right there. It's like a little above eye line distance. So it's pretty nice. Sometimes you see a little bit of vignetting here on the bottom just because I need to lift it just microscopically, and I haven't had a chance to do it, just the right amount. But I've got a whole rig, like a camera rig, just mounted to my desk, where I've got a light and I've got the microphone and I've got the camera on it. So I spent a few $1,000s. But in terms of getting just a good camera and good camera quality, can you go through options too? Because you can use your webcam, but if someone wants to do better than a webcam, what other options do they have?
Sure. Now, there's a huge marketplace for, whatever cameras. There's tons of cameras you can buy. I'm partial to Sony because that's what I use. Sony cameras work really great. You can use anything in their A7 series. Those usually run anywhere between $800 to almost $2,000-$3,000. Again, totally optional in terms of how much you want to spend. Some of those basic cameras work really well. A new camera that just came out, it's called the Sony, I believe it's a ZV-1. It's meant specifically for vlogging, and that's a great camera. I think that runs for about $800. That has audio built in. It does autofocusing and everything, and it's got a pretty large lens so that the background's blur. I can talk a little bit more about the whole background blur that you can see here. That's caused by a lens with a large aperture. Without getting too technical, basically it allows me to be focused and the background's blurred. Two things that contribute to that are the lens, which has a large aperture, it's called f1.4, and then the distance from the background to myself. If you're right up against the wall, doesn't matter how much money you're going to spend, everything's going to be in focus. My office is a little bit messy, so I enjoy having that background blur.
And I think the background blur pretty much looks good for everyone.
Yes.
Yes. And so why don't you share exactly what you did for me specifically? I had my desk, and my desk is only I'm about 1, 2, 3, less than 4 feet from the wall behind me. So if I wanted to go further out, I could have more distance behind me. But why don't you look at just when you came into my space and how you got me set up and what we chose specifically?
Sure. I'm really kind of a bootstrap type of person where I can find something and just kind of make it work. With Marisa's case, she has a large window with lots of ambient light. And because of the way her desk is positioned, we focused on just slightly turning the table so that there's some lead lines to the background. We focus on cleaning up the background so there's nothing distracting. Typically, you want to find something where it's just the focus is solely on you. And that's what a large large lens aperture helps you kind of create, because it allows everything else to be out of focus. You typically don't want things overly bright in the background or overly powerful. You want to focus on you. So for me, for example, I'm wearing blue, my background's white. And so there's lots of contrast there. If you're wearing green and your background's green, you're just going to blend right in. So typically creating some sort of distance, putting myself right between where these two walls meet in the back, that helps create a focus point so that everyone's just focused on me and not on my background.
The one thing that I'll show you all too is, I just had a plain wall behind me. It was like a dark blue wall. So I went to a great big canvas here and I just looked for things that were somewhat monochromatic there. And you can look at the different, collections, subjects, and styles. I went to abstract, and that's just what I looked at. You can see it's very similar to what is behind me. And then you can look at just one kind of, this was the shape that I used here, just because it fit my space. And then you can filter by, all the different blues, for example. And I'm probably going to get another set of purple so I can change it out at different times and have a different set of backgrounds. But of course, anything with whites would blow out, pretty quickly there. But this is essentially what I did to get my background. And then I just had an art hanger come and hang them, evenly behind. But the whole project cost me, if you think about at 50% off, it was maybe $60 a piece, times however many behind me. And that's what I did with, my background. Sometimes you want to speak to having bookshelves behind you or different kinds of backgrounds behind you. I prefer not to be flat against a wall. I think having a little bit of real space. I'm not a big fan of going green screen and having fake backgrounds, behind, because most of the time it creates weird blurring effect unless you have your light perfect. But I also think people enjoy seeing people in real spaces. Like it creates a warmth that you can't replace with a fake background, right? I appreciate you and I appreciate you coming out, and thank you so much. Hopefully you got some useful tidbits here, and you don't have to spend a fortune to make this good. I mean, I did spend a fortune, but I'm just at the point where this is the kind of investment that's important for me to make. But earlier on, when I was first getting started, we built a homemade teleprompter. Murray and I ordered a piece of directional glass on the internet for $14. And then we got a cardboard box and we put the box over our camera and tripod. And we just did it all that way. And I used that cardboard box for years until I sprung the $1,500 or $2,000 for a proper teleprompter and could afford to do all that. So make use with what you have to begin with. Start scrappy and stay scrappy for as long as you need to. And then at the end of the day, you'll ultimately be able to afford all the best gear when the time comes, and you're going to have fun. All right. Take care, y'all. Bye.
Take care.